Okay, so we're back. Welcome to I Love You, Buddy. We didn't play a theme song for you to hear
No,
because the
no.
theme song that we usually have for it gets us blocked in foreign countries.
Oh, really? In
Yep.
foreign countries?
Yeah.
Do we have
Russia, not a fan of it.
foreign listeners? Is that what's going on?
I mean, we got people from Scotland that watch or listen.
Oh, that's true. We do. That's what's up.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Yeah, we
we
can do that.
worldwide. We worldwide, baby.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so recent to us, far away to the listener viewer, we hung out.
Yep. Yep. We hung out. We'll probably hang out. We probably would have by the time this airs. We would have hung out again,
Yeah,
hopefully. But yeah,
that'd be
we just hung out
nice.
the other day. But we just hung
Yeah,
out the other day. As
yeah,
far as
yeah.
us in our real time.
And I appreciate you coming out here for a little fire pit action. That was
Yeah,
fun.
man, that was great. We made some nan pizzas, non pizzas. Nan, is
So
it nan or
good.
non?
Ow, non.
Non bread? I
I
don't,
don't non.
but I didn't want to say non pizza and make it like, well, what's non pizza? Like it's pizza, but it's not pizza. No, it's
Yeah,
the
that's
nan bread.
That's very vegetarian of you.
Non NAAN bread.
We had a good
Fucking
time.
flatbread. We made flatbread pizzas. Jesus Christ. Let's be very white about this. We made flatbread
Ah,
pizzas.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
we had a
yeah.
fire pit going and hung out, and it was fucking awesome, dude. It was so
Couldn't
chill.
complain.
It
Couldn't
was very
complain.
chill.
So how
Um,
you been?
Pretty good, man. Can't complain. Just been
Yeah,
doing shit. Yeah, we got a couple days. My kid's having
yeah,
surgery. Um,
yeah.
yeah, and so like that's gonna be a thing. We'll see. I'm very nervous as a parent. It's gonna be a
Right.
not fun like kind of 2 hour block where we're just waiting in the waiting room until he gets out of surgery, and then I'm nervous to see like how he feels waking up. He's
Hmm.
excited going into it, thank God, because if he was scared, like it would it would be
Yeah.
worse for us. But yeah, so it's definitely like it's one of those like parent things that
Right.
you go through.
Right.
Not
Right.
necessarily everybody has to, but
No, I
kids
get that
fall out of a
because
tree and break their arm. Like there's always just
yeah,
shit that's just always scary as a parent, and so it's one of those things. So I'm anticipating that right now. So everything's been
it
pretty good, and I'm
it's
anticipating
weird
that.
to me. It's weird to me how quickly our minds change from one temperature to another. Because I'll even say, like Brooke, there's something recently that happened to Teen Hilton, where he did something in his life that he's never done before, and Brooke went from like her own experiences to I'm nervous about this experience for him, and I don't know what it is about me. I don't know if it's the '80s child in me,
Uh huh.
where I'm like, no, it's fine. They gotta have a life to figure out their own shit
Yeah.
almost.
I
Now
know. Yeah.
surgery, completely understand
Right. Right. Yeah.
the fear in that. Like I have friends that have their own fear of going under anesthesia.
Right. Sure.
Like they freak
Sure.
out at being like, "What if I don't wake up?" And it's just like,
Yeah.
"What? Then you don't fucking wake up, pal."
Right. Yeah. Right. It's
So,
fine for you. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, for sure. But I know what you mean because, like, as a parent, you never want your kids to suffer. But like, suffering is like a part of life.
Right.
And you kind of have to go. Like, you're not going to grow as a person unless you kind of go through that. I always
Right.
said like, there's you want to don't learn the hard way. You know what I mean? Like, take my advice, don't learn it the hard way. But I always think it's
Hmm.
like the opposite. Like, the hard way is trying to learn it without actually going through the experience. Once you have
Right.
the experience, then it's easy to learn that lesson. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, you
Right.
never have to, doubt that again. But
Right.
so I always feel like going through that, and anyone that gives you advice on something
Hmm.
to do or not to do, they're only able to give you that advice because they had already made that mistake and
Absolutely.
made that error. So like, you kind of have to do it. So yeah, it's one of those things that like, as a parent, you have to be like, let them fuck up, let them, make
Yeah.
mistakes and fucking feel the ramifications of that mistake. But it's easier said than done for a parent.
And I don't know if you're this type of person. So, do you ever look at things regretful? Like, do you ever like if I could go back in time and switch this, I would.
Right. Um, no, I don't. The short answer is no. I don't think of shit like that.
Hmm.
The only because one, I'm like, I'll wonder like, oh, if I had gone with option B instead of option A, I wonder what my life would be like. But
Right.
I don't know. It's just in my mind, it's just as likely to be better as it is for it to be worse. And so there's no like big like regrets on that. And there's things that there's like bad things that happen. And here's like kind of like a minor version of that where I got into a car accident. And then, you know, my car was in the shop for like 2 months and it's been this huge pain in the ass. And I was just thinking like, cause we drove by that, my wife and I just drove down the street where I got hit or whatever. And we're like, oh, this is where it happened. And I was just thinking, I was like, man, if I had just like left 5 seconds earlier or 5 seconds later, that whole part of my life would not have had to go through that ordeal. That's not like a level of regret, but I can't help but like fixate on like, oh, and same thing with like huge arguments that she and I have like gotten into where it's like ruined the entire night. And it's like, I'll trace it back to like one comment. Like if I just didn't say, oh, I'm hungry, that wouldn't have started the conversation about food, which would have gotten into the argument. I'm like, if I would have just not said those words,
I would have traced it back to the original,
different night.
Where I would have, like, instead of saying, you're just a big bitch,
right?
Then none of this would have happened.
No, I traced it back even before that. I'm like, what's the thing that led to saying you're a bitch? You're a fucking cunt. Whatever. I'll take it to the most insignificant detail is what I'll trace it back to. The easiest thing to like switch, and I'll fixate on that. I don't call that like regret because I never know if like my life would be better off if somebody gave me that ability. If a genie was like, hey, would you like to go back and change this? That would be the scariest thing ever because it would be a roll of the dice. I have no idea. Right. It could secretly be the darkest timeline, even though I think that like, oh, that would have been I wish I would have done that or whatever. What about you? Do you have like regrets on shit?
Not really, just because I do feel like my path has been made for a specific reason. It's not about the things that were before. It's about where it gets you.
Yeah,
and I mean that specifically through like even relationship things. Like I can't ever say here, oh, I wish I was never with this ex. Because if I wasn't with that ex, then I don't meet this ex, and then I don't meet this current love of my life that like I'm with, where I have my beautiful kids and like all of that. Living in the past is a weird thing. It's weird. I won't lie that recently that I always get not fixated, that's not the word, but I'll just have memories of me in my 20s. Never want to go back, never want to see that, but I will get like clear-cut memories of me in my 20s and I just think about them. But like I do have friends, and I mean everybody's seen it, like people will live in their high school past. Like we probably talked about it on I Love You Buddy or even Improper Guidance where people that go to the reunions, like they're so fucking invested in those 4 years of their lives that they have not been able to complete the 20 that we're at just past it.
Right. I mean I don't know, like I can kind of get it a little bit, especially if you feel like you peaked in high school or you felt like a lot of the things that you...
But you can't fucking peak in high school. There's no peaking.
Yeah, well, no, but I mean, sometimes there are, like, especially if you were like on, like, what if you were like the fucking quarterback or something, or like felt like you had a ton of friends in high school and then like, or were popular, and then all of the shit that kind of like dies with high school. And then now you just enter the workforce and there's not really much you're doing that's like exciting or impressive or like, brag worthy or whatever to be proud of. It could, I could guess it would, feel like I remember like seeing like Pauly Shore on like a podcast or something. And he was just like, he talked about like, it's sad. He's like, I used to be worshipped. Like everywhere I went, I was just worshipped. And I think he's like, and now like no one gives a shit. Like then I became like a joke and no one gives a shit. And so like, he's somebody that like openly like lives in the past because the 90s were so good to Pauly Shore. He was like the best, funniest, he could do no wrong. And like now, now it's easy to just make fun of him or whatever. And so there might be people with like, smaller versions of that, but felt like in high school they were somebody. And then after high school, they just became a nobody, I guess.
Well, I don't know. I find people, maybe it's that he's not that creative. I'm not trying to attack Pauly Shore. Because big Pauly Shore guy in the 90s specifically.
Of course.
Like
Well, he had that
there's
one
this
bit. You can only be that character, but so many times in a row before it gets
right.
old.
But like even when I look at, I'm gonna just bring myself into this for one fucking second.
Okay.
When
Great.
I in high school, whatever, did drama, so like I'm into plays and doing the acting thing.
Yeah.
Then I transferred that energy into pro wrestling, first
Right.
love of mine, and I was
Right.
able to do that. And I
Yep.
went places. I wrestled in front of thousands or a
Yep.
thousand people, whatever. Fucking, and then that transcends into me acting, even writing, and being
Yep.
able to create something there, transitioning into podcasting, which
Yeah.
transitions to a podcast on video now. Like,
Right.
if you're
That's what I'm
not,
saying.
but the difference is like, and I'll be transparent. I've wrestled in front of 1,000 people. I can't sit here and say that 1,000 people are going
right.
to watch this.
Right.
But it's
right.
still moving on, trying to be creative and keep it going.
Right. And I get what you're saying. So like, I don't think somebody that like would feel that they peaked in high school. I'm not saying like they're an innocent person and like, well, yeah, for sure. They should have kept pursuing things if that's what you decided to keep pursuing things. But what I'm saying is like, to the people that didn't, that's how they can end up being stuck in the past. You're continuing to do things that you could say you're proud of. You know, look at the Thrill Me podcast network. You know what I mean? Like that's something as a whole that you'd be like, I still got really cool shit that I'm doing and that I'm proud of. Whereas in some people then if you didn't have any of this, if you just went to work every day and you didn't do podcasting whatsoever,
Put a gun in my mouth.
Exactly. And then you would look back on like your wrestling days and just like every night you'd get drunk and you'd watch your old wrestling videos being like, those were the days, man. Those were the days. And every conversation you'd have with a stranger would be like, I used to wrestled in front of 1,000 people. Like that shit doesn't come up as much because you're also doing shit now, which is great. And I'm the same way. I'm always like pursuing like whatever.
Move on.
Yeah, exactly. But I think some people don't. I don't know if it's from whatever their life circumstances. Maybe it doesn't allow them, or maybe they're just popular because they were good looking. And it's not necessarily like a creative skill or a creative outlook. And then so when they get into the real world, they just get a job and it's like nobody cares that, or, your looks kind of start to drop and you're not special for no reason anymore. And like Pauly Shore just was a character. The Weasel, you know what I mean? Like he just had that one thing and everyone thought it was the most hilarious shit ever. But that was his one trick. He's never could have done, I don't know if anyone could have handled him doing drama, but that if he would have evolved as an actor, if he would have
taken the chances, that's my thing.
But I think he was somebody who just like, well, his mom is, owned the Comedy Store. I want to say it was the Comedy Store in Mitzi. And so he was always kind of around those people. So I think he had a lot of
ends. Yeah,
exactly.
1,000.
So things were a little easy for him. And then I think when that hype went away, he felt like there was like nothing left. Whereas, and maybe he did try to pursue it, but like, again, he just didn't have that.
I forget when it came out. I'll look up right now. But I mean, he had a movie come out eventually that was called Pauly Shore is Dead.
Yes, I remember this. I didn't see it, but I remember it coming up like, oh, well, because the guy, he had been like, fell off the face of the earth for like 10 years or so.
It came out in 2003. And like even that got a bad, like it's got a 4.4 on IMDb. But I think if he would have went the route of maybe not even dramatic, but something with a different flavor. I always go back to like Dane Cook, where at least Dane Cook, it didn't work. Obviously it didn't work, but at least he tried things outside of the box. Like I know he was in that Mr. Brooks movie where he was kind of a psychopath, and then he was in Dan something with Steve Carell. I forget what it is.
Dan in Real Life. That's one of my favorite movies. Yeah.
And he's pretty good in that. And he took swings into different versions of himself.
Yes,
yeah, it didn't work, but I think I don't think it worked for his personal life, not actually his career.
Right. Well, and that's a great example. Like bringing up like Dane Cook is like somebody that's similar to Paul Shore, where he had found something, a style of comedy that just blew up. It wasn't super respected by other comedians because they felt like it
Right.
was just like a trick. Like, oh, you just kind of tapped into this way to make people laugh, and
Right.
you're not actually
Right.
saying anything of real substance. But like, he blew up, and he was like the biggest comedian for a couple years there. And then, like everything else, you have this huge up, and then it's, then it falls. And I think he did try some more things, but and even though he's never going to be back to that peak level, he is at least respected by the comedy community now.
Right.
It's
Plus,
been
he's a millionaire. Who gives a shit?
well, yeah, for sure. Well, I'm sure he gives a shit. Like, I'm sure, like he was like at the top for a while, and it
Yeah.
sucks for all of that just to drop like pretty, suddenly. Especially because it came out, like some things about him like stealing material from
jokes
people
and stuff. Right.
yeah, and that kind of ruins it, and whatever.
It's wild to me. It's wild to me that the comedy world, a world I have no like intel in, but it does seem like a lot of their drama comes to the forefront a lot.
Yeah,
And it's funny to me when, oh, you stole a joke or whatever.
yeah,
And let's just say they did make it. And I'm not defending that at all. But it's funny to me because you look at like music where there are songwriters who don't sing.
yeah.
But we give all the accolades to these singers who have not made up the words that are being sung. But we
Right.
respect them more.
Well,
Even
okay,
though
so that's
this guy
fair.
can tell the joke better than this guy can tell a joke.
Right. Okay. Well, so that's fair, but I think similar shit goes on there. So there are plenty of comedians that have people write for them. Like Jim Gaffigan, it's him and his wife that write his acts together. So it's not
wow.
just him. Mike Birbiglia has his brother, Joe Birbiglia, helps him write all of his stuff or whatever. And there's some comedians that like, they buy jokes from other people or whatever. And but that's something that like, that's something that's done, I guess, correctly versus like stealing is a different thing. And so the same thing with like music. Like, yeah, a lot of these musicians didn't write these words, especially like pop stars and stuff. They don't write these words. They don't write these songs. They just sing and perform them, but they're not stealing. And that's the people that are writing the songs are getting something out of it because they're getting paid to write the songs or whatever. They're the producers. But I think there's something to like when somebody comes up with material and somebody else steals it from them, then they can't do that material anymore. And I think that's where it becomes like fucked up. And so, and I've listened to, I mean, almost every podcast I listen to are comedians talking to each other. So I've heard a lot of conversation about this. And I think a lot of comedians like to give other comedians the benefit of the doubt. And they can discuss things like, I have a joke that's very similar, and they're all aware that like that happens. They're all aware that like you hear somebody do a joke or a bit and then you forget that you heard that. And then when you think of it later, you think it's your own, but usually you own up to it pretty quick. And then there's stuff where it's like, Amy Schumer and stuff where like, all right, here's exhibit A, exhibit B, exhibit C. It starts to be like, this is a little too close, man. Like and I've heard them like dissect, like, yes, this happens accidentally all the time, but sometimes it's like, okay, this seems like a little too, whatever it may be or whatever. So I think that's part of it. But I think Dane Cook is something that like he was accused of it and then maybe not necessarily. He did a great scene with Louis C.K. on Louis' show. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I haven't watched the scene. I've heard of it.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. I mean, it was all written, but I imagine like maybe they had a conversation and then like Louis just wrote that into a
because
script
it
or
was
whatever.
a Louis joke he did.
Yes, it was a lot of Louis shit. And what Dane on the show, at least, again, this was scripted, but I imagine it was a lot of his own words and his opinions. Was Dane felt like, yeah, you didn't say that I stole from you, but you let everybody else say it. And then you never stood up for me, or like you let them say it. And it brought me down off of this huge pedestal that I was on. And he's like, and it fucking sucked. And it was the worst. And especially if you feel like you're like, I know I didn't steal that material, yet I was chastised for doing it. That's got to be a shitty fucking thing to go through.
Right.
And so they had that kind of conversation about it. And Louis was like, maybe you didn't know, maybe you just heard my material and you didn't know that you heard it or whatever. And, you just regurgitate it because you were just on top of the world, like whatever.
Right.
Or
right.
maybe sometimes like comedians again, they have people that write for them, and the people that write
Yeah.
for them could be stealing shit, and then
That's true too. Like
that
if you
happens.
sell that joke to one guy, you might sell it again.
Right, exactly. So,
Yeah.
that shit happens. But anyway, so like I think like yeah, sometimes people peak early and then like their life isn't as good anymore. I'm glad people like you and I are like still like chugging along and continue to find things
Right.
that I have things that I know and that I'm proud of that I know I'll never do again or I'll likely never
Right.
do again. Like,
Oh
like
yeah.
wrestle in front of 1,000 people. And I'm like,
Right.
that's kind of a bummer, but I'm like, I got different versions of that now, which is fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I never it's just I think for me just figuring out things that make you happy that are as a creative unit. I don't know. Not everybody is creative. You can't do, but I do
Right.
hope people are like, you know what? I like doing this. I like building this thing. I'm going to keep building things and I'm going to build to bigger and better things. And that's
Right.
always my motif. And I've said it a bunch of times and I'm double downing on it because it is getting closer to it. Like, my goal for 41 has always been I'm making a beer.
Right.
Like,
Right.
no, whether it's me making it at home or whatever, but like I'm going to figure out the process of making a beer, and from there it's going to be like, okay, I did it. Where do I go
Right.
from here? It's not
Right.
necessarily something that's to the masses, but eventually it could get to a point in 5 to 8 years where it's like, holy shit, I'm sitting in a building where my beer is being made.
Right. Yeah. And that's cool. But it's you at least have the small goal. Like I did that uh
Mm-hmm.
when we started in the pandemic, me and a
Mm-hmm.
friend that were doing a hobby, like doing some woodworking stuff, and we are like,
Right.
well, we can't just keep making shit and then have it sit around the shop and taking up space. We're like, well,
Right.
maybe we could sell stuff on Etsy. And so we started to, and we just tried like we just wanted to make shit and we just wanted to like maybe make some money while we're doing it. Not even like pocket change, just enough to fund more material so we can continue to make shit. And then it
Right.
turned into a legitimate business that
Right.
became both he and I's like full-time job
Income.
for
Right.
yeah, exactly. And now it's and then now I've since left and
Right.
are pursuing my own career, but now he alone does it and it's a legitimate business and it's something that's like we didn't anticipate. We were just looking at like the small thing, like you were saying, like just
Right.
making a beer, and then it
Right.
could within 5 years or whatever, like
Exactly.
be something more. But that's always the thing. You always like you plant those seeds and you always kind of like, well, this is fun. And even if it doesn't work out, it's part of the process. And
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of people that don't do that shit, man, which is sad.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is sad. It is sad where, I've learned some things about some friends of mine recently that they stopped doing. Like,
Right.
there's a friend of mine who loved the draw when they were younger, and
Right.
fucking
Right.
like I saw some of the drawing, and I was like, "Fuck, this is great." How long is it? Like, do you still do it? And he was like, "Nah, I stopped at high school. Like that was
Right.
it. That was the." And he's 40, so like
Right. Wow.
to just give up on something that's just it was a happy place thing.
Right. Right.
I,
Yeah.
I just
Exactly.
can't imagine. I just
Yeah.
cannot
Yeah.
imagine.
I mean, if they're happy, if they're fine, then to each their own. But
Nah,
I,
he said, "You want to
he's
see
bummed
my
about it.
latest drawing?" He showed
He's
it to me, and
bummed
it
about
said, "Oh, it's my suicide note."
Right. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
I was like, "Oh, this really is different."
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. So yeah, and that's but it's also it's never too late to do anything
Oh
in your
no,
life,
that's
which
in
is
that. I I don't know if you look at it this way. I look at Tom Cruise as a man who cemented his life as the action star in his late 40s to
right.
60s.
Right.
Like
Yes.
he was an actor in
Yes.
the 80s,
Yes.
90s.
I know.
And then
I
from
know.
2000 on, he was
How
like,
about that?
I'm just the biggest action star you've ever
How
seen.
about that? It should have been. It's like normally it's like the opposite. You start off as like this action star, and then once you can't do those stunts anymore, then you settle into like being like an actor,
Right.
I guess.
Right. Right.
And yeah, he's doing the opposite, which is wild. With it doesn't seem like he's slowing down whatsoever.
I mean, he might be, man.
I mean, eventually he has to. I mean, he just
Yeah.
absolutely has to.
But that's where I am with my thing. Like, I want to create this beer, and being only 40 years old, to think at 50 I could be just running a brewery, and then at the same
Yeah.
time, hey, we like your beer, we want to buy your beer, and now you can retire.
Right.
And now I have a retirement.
Right. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
my goal. That
Right,
is the
yes.
end game of my goal.
Right. Yeah. As of right now, and that can always evolve into something else. Like sometimes
Right.
you never know what's going to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree, and I would be regretful if I didn't pursue stuff like that. If I just continued
Right.
down the path I was on, and just chugging away at life. I think I want to say, yeah, Theo Vaughn might have said it, but he was talking about how like sometimes life just feels like a series of to-do lists.
Yeah.
And he's not actually living. I can't remember whatever quote he said was way better, but like, yeah, he's not actually living. It's just he's just going through a to-do list, and I'm like, man, I feel that so hard sometimes because you go to work, you come home, you got chores to do. Okay, gotta do this. Gotta let the dog out. Gotta clean this up. Got to straighten this up. I got to pack my lunch for tomorrow. You got the kids.
Yeah.
You got kid stuff. We got to give them a bath. We got to blah, blah, blah. And then it's like there's not a lot of time for you, in there. And then you just go on to the next thing. It's like to-do list, just checking things off.
Sure.
And then you get completely lost, which is that's the struggle, is being in the midst of. That's where I also feel like our second coming is once our kids are just completely grown and we're completely free again.
Right.
We're not, family people where we got we got kids and responsibilities and all this shit.
Right.
And I mean, I've seen my parents go through it. I've seen my older generations go through it. Like the second their kids are all like teenagers and up, it's like they're like, okay, well, what are we doing with our life now? Their life has been on hold for 15 years or so, 18 years, however long. Right. And then now they can go right back into like picking up hobbies again and like pursuing like bigger ideas stuff and whatever. And so like I always think about like, oh, well, my kid's 8 right now. Who knows what my life is going to be like in 10 years, where it opens up again. Even more so than now. Now I'm like trying to force little times for myself and my hobbies or whatever. But eventually it might just be like, I get bored around the house.
And I'll be honest, I do feel like, living through the kids is also another way of not peaking, because you are trying to raise this person to be a good person, a person of society, if you will, while also they're going through their stuff. Like we watched Teen Hilton play soccer this past weekend, and like it's amazing how much I've seen a progression of this kid playing, and it's kind of rewarding to watch him do it.
Yes.
So,
yeah, it's fun.
So I do feel like that's another. It's funny to me when like I have friends that don't have kids and don't want kids and completely understand why you don't. But it's funny to me when, and I don't know if you've ever received this, so maybe this is a good little fucking, and no names will be named.
Okay.
But it's funny to me when, like, sometimes I'll get Instagram reels or some kind of meme of something. They'll send me, like, it's a meme or a reel of why they're happy that they're not parents. Like, it'll be like, reason number 73, why it's good I'm not a parent. I didn't have to wake up at the crack of dawn to go to a game.
Stick a pin in that. The highest liked, I think it was on Facebook. This is also back, this is back then. This is 10 years ago. But the thing I posted on Facebook that I think got the most likes was me saying, I'm taking a nap because I don't have children. And then when I woke up, like my phone had like blown up. It went, I mean, not like viral, but like I had never gotten so many likes. And so I was like, wow, I think that resonated with people with and without children. But yeah, so that's just an example of what you're saying. Yeah, so keep going.
It's just so funny to me of almost, I don't know why it bothers me. It does feel like an attack, almost.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And
like you don't like people going, aha, I have kids, you don't.
And I laugh at it, and whatever, but it does come off a little like, well, okay, good for fucking you. Because I'm over here, I'm raising another human that gets to carry on whatever thing. Like, I get to see something that you're not seeing, which I'm not saying you want to see that thing. That is perfectly fine, beautiful, love it. But there's something about me getting to see my young one be invested in things that I was invested in.
Yeah.
And you get to carry that on.
Of course.
I get to see things that Brooke inside of him that's carrying on. So it's just funny to me when, like, I don't go on Instagram being like number 197 of why being a parent's great and you're solo dead ass ain't going to have no one taking care of you. I at least got a house to stay in when I'm 80, pal.
But, you know, it's funny. I was actually talking to a mutual friend of ours about like what some of his hobbies or whatever, and like when he was saying like he doesn't really have time for some of these hobbies like playing music and stuff, and he's gonna know if he listens to this who I'm talking about, and and he doesn't have kids, and I was like, what's your excuse of why you're not doing this shit, man? Like, you come home from work. And what are you doing? You don't have kids. You do whatever the fuck you want. What's your fucking excuse of why? Like, before we had kids, Leanne and I used to like be so bored on like weeknights and stuff. Sometimes we would just go to Target just to walk around and get out of the house. Like, we were ready to have kids because we were like, all right, we've done everything we can. You know, we had already been together for 10 years, and like we're just watching TV every single night, wasting our lives away. We need something to shake this up. But so yeah, sometimes people like, you know, they don't necessarily seem any happier anyway, the fact that they don't have kids. But if you don't want kids, I'm not the type to like be like, oh, you should be part of this club. But you are to be. I've been part of their club. I've been a non-parent before, and but I also get to be part of a parenting club, which means like we get these experiences. We get experience what it's like to have a kid. It's fucking crazy in a good way.
I don't wish it upon anybody because it's definitely one of those choices where it's like you got to make that choice.
Yes,
but what I kind of find funny is you won't ever see me do this as well. The amount of people people will. Like, grandparents will push people to have families. Like, be like, oh, have a baby. But the amount of fucking people that will push someone to be like, you should get a dog. Go fuck yourself.
Right, yeah. Fair.
Like, the amount of people, don't you want a fur baby? Like, fucking SPCA's outside of Starbucks being like, hey, come pick up this fur baby. I don't see nobody being like, come up, pick up this baby.
Right, yeah. That's true. Well, because I don't know, but that is true, and it's also a bit of a part of society. Like, you can't, like, if you're in a relationship for a while, everyone's always asking when you get married, and then you get married to shut them up, and then everybody asks when you having a kid, and then you have a kid, and then like when you having another, when
are you going to have a grandchild?
Right, and then when are you getting divorced? And when you get divorced, when you get yeah. So one of my I say a lot. There's a lot. It's Louis C.K. joke. It was one of my favorites.
That's good.
He said he's like, I've been married for like, I can't remember how many, but he was like, I've been married for 13 years, so we're almost done. So anytime I say how long Leanne and I've been married for, I always follow it up with, so we're almost done.
Fucking Brooke just texted me, you love our fur baby. No! Anyways.
I mean, it's similar to having a kid. It's a huge responsibility. It's a pain in the fucking ass, but then it's also a source of joy and love, and, you know, it's just like anything else. Yeah. And every single person that doesn't have fucking kids has a fucking animal. I don't think I know anybody that has no kids and no pets. But then, you know, you're if you don't, then you're fine. But like, having a kid is just like having a pet. It's just, you know, dialed up.
This one talks to you.
Yeah, it's on the next level, and it continues to grow and be a different thing. It's like having a kid is like having a pet fish that grows into like a pet rat, that grows into like a pet turtle, and then goes to like a pet cat, and then it goes to a pet dog, and then it goes to a pet like salamander. Like every year, it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you and I used to have a baby. You and I were parents of a baby, an infant, and then we were like parents of a toddler, and now we're parents of kids, and then eventually it's parents of teenagers. You know what I mean? Like, so it's all like a different version of, like, it's completely different. You're always a new parent because. While you have more than one kid, like however old your oldest kid is, that's you have a teen in your house. Yeah. You've never had, you know, a teen, you're a new teen parent. And that's how it's going to be, as, you know, as for the rest of your life or whatever. Eventually your kid's going to be 20 years old. It's going to be the first time you've been a parent of a 20-year-old. And that's going to be a new experience and a new way to, you know, be a parent.
How do you evolve in that relationship?
Right, exactly. And it's a constant evolution, which is always like, so you're always not an expert at it because it's constantly changing or whatever.
You ain't wrong.
Anyway.
All right. Well, we talked a bunch of shit today.
Yeah, we
Thanks
did.
for watching or listening to Love You Buddy. And you can catch us back doing Core Memory Unlocked for the Christmas season. I know we got some goodies coming down, but love you, buddy.
Love you, buddy.
End the fucking recording.
Yeah, I was going to say.
End the fucking recording.
Do it.